The Move, Flowers in the Rain. Oh, I'm just so disgusted with myself for laughing at this joke that's coming on the text. I've got Martin Bloomfield with me now in the studio, and we're going to talk about something else in a moment. But Martin, we both laughed because I was saying I don't understand this joke, because when it's written down, sometimes you don't until you say them. Knock, knock, who's there? Europe, Europe who? And we fell about. How childish. And that person's left their name off the text as well. Anyway, I fell into that trap. Hook, line and sinker. Martin, you have founded a Dyslexia and Business Award.
Yeah. And
we'll hear your story in a few minutes, but I can't let you talk without telling me a joke.
Most people try to stop me from telling jokes, unfortunately. OK, there were these two bears, Mr. and Mrs. Foot, and they decided to have a baby, so they didn't. They called it Foot. And they thought, well, we like this conjugating business, and Foot's getting a little lonely. Let's have another baby, so they didn't. They called it Foot, Foot. And they thought, well, we like it so much, let's have another one. So they didn't. They called it Foot, Foot, Foot. So one day, Mr. Foot, Mrs. Foot, 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 and Foot, Foot, Foot were walking through the jungle, and Foot got his foot caught in a bear trap. So Mr. Foot saw Foot's foot caught in a bear trap, and Foot went, oh no, Foot's caught in a bear trap. So Foot ran over to get Foot out of the bear trap, but Foot got his foot caught in a bear trap as well. So Foot, who was a vet, came along and saw Foot's foot caught in a bear trap, and Foot's foot caught in a bear trap as well. So Foot went over to Foot and yanked Foot by the shoulders, but Foot's foot came off, and Foot flew across the jungle, landed with his head in another bear trap and died. And it was really bad, and Foot then saw Foot's foot caught in a bear trap. So Foot went over to Foot and yanked Foot's foot out of the bear trap, and Foot wasn't allowed to go for any more walks for another 6 weeks while his foot healed. So one day, Mr. Foot, Mrs. Foot, and Foot were walking through the jungle because Foot was dead, and Foot wasn't allowed to go for any more walks, and Foot, the vet, was at home. And one day, Mr. Foot, Mrs. Foot, and Foot were walking through the jungle, and Foot got his foot caught in a bear trap. So Foot, the vet, came along again, saw Foot's foot caught in the bear trap, and yanked Foot by the shoulders, but Foot's foot came off, and Foot flew across the jungle, landed with his head in another bear trap and died. And Foot, the vet, turned to Mr. and Mrs. Foot and said, I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Foot, we're going to have to bury your poor son, Foot. And Mrs. Foot started crying, and Mr. Foot turned to Mrs. Foot and said, why are you crying, Mrs. Foot? And Mrs. Foot turned to Mr. Foot and said, well, we've already got one foot in the grave.
I lost the will to live halfway through that. I can't believe you've just come out with that off the top of your head when we invited you in to talk about dyslexia.
Yeah, I thought you might have needed a bit of cushioning going on there.
Tremendous effort.
Thank you very much.
That is the only joke I've ever heard that I could not repeat to anyone else. You lost me.
Years ago, people used to ask me to tell that joke, and I got so bored with telling it. Yeah. That I used to demand money for it. I said, I'm only going to tell it for money. And someone once said, OK, here's 10p. So I started telling it, and halfway through they gave me 10p to stop, which is a bit disappointing.
I can see that now. Martin, despite what we've just heard, at school you were labelled lazy, unintelligent and disorganised.
Absolutely, yeah.
And now look at you. But the reason was, you didn't do brilliantly at school, did you?
I did terribly at school. I got an O-level. In those days, we did O-levels, and I got one O-level, and it was a grade C, so it wasn't even a very good O-level. Oh. And, I scraped my entire time at school. I was regularly getting between 5 and 20% in exams. If I got 25% in a maths exam, that was considered a success for me. Yeah. And I was just dreadful. And I didn't know why. I just assumed that it was because the teachers weren't teaching me properly or whatever, which I suppose in one sense you could say was correct, but they didn't know what was going on with me.
What did your mum and dad think? Because they knew that, surely, you were their son. They were bright people. You must be bright. What's going on?
They loved me nevertheless. I think that was what it was. I mean, I used to dread getting my report cards. They were consistently poor and consistently terrible. And consistently I get this report, Martin does not try. Or Martin has the ability, but his essays are terrible. And even through into university years, I mean, this is when I started to really realise that I might have some form of dyslexia. All my lecturers were telling me, Martin, you're really bright, but your essays come out as stream of consciousness. Or why don't you do the reading that we ask you to do? Constantly I'd be getting these problems. And when I became a postgraduate, which took a long, long time, when I became a postgraduate, everybody else used to attend postgraduate seminars and where they'd have to read a little chapter of a book and prepare something. And for these people, it would take a couple of hours to read. And for me, I couldn't get it done in a week. And I certainly couldn't get that done in my other work. And I started to realise there was something seriously wrong going on, and I just didn't know what it was.
And just before some music and we carry on talking, how old were you when everybody, including yourself, realised it was dyslexia?
I was 30.
Really?
Yeah.
Golly, that just wouldn't happen now, would it?
Yes.
Would it?
Well, it only happened a few years ago. I'm not that old. Come on.
That's true. You're not.
No, I mean, it does still happen, partially because everybody knows about dyslexia, but not very many people know anything about dyslexia.
Okay.
And this is the thing we've got to realise, and it's very difficult for people to actually understand what dyslexia is. And how can you spot it if you don't know what it is?
We'll answer that question, hopefully, after Dave Edmonds on BBC Radio Nottingham. I hear you knocking. Dave Edmonds, I hear you knocking.
BBC Radio Nottingham. The Morning Show with Francis Finn.
My guest is Martin Bloomfield at the moment, and he is dyslexic, but didn't find out till he was 30, which is how long ago? Go on, admit it.
6 years ago.
6 years ago. When I said that wouldn't happen now, I would like to think that if children are in school and for some reason they're just not performing as perhaps teachers think they could, I would hope that dyslexia would be on the list of things for teachers to check, or parents at least.
It could well be. And the classic sign of dyslexia is when the child's intelligence and the child's writing skills don't match up. That's
exactly.
the classic sign. That's what you first look for.
Which is what happened with you, of course.
It is, and yet I was very good at English. That was the O level that I got. I happened to be very badly number blind and quite dyspraxic, which basically means clinically clumsy. And because my English was good, nobody even thought of dyslexia. I mean, I never saw words jumping around on a page, and it's very seldom that I'll get B's and D's mixed up, and you know, I can quite easily mind my P's and Q's, as it were. And so I never really had that issue. And if you were to ask me what dyslexia was in those days, I'd say, well, it's when you see words moving on a page. It's when you can't write B's and D's.
Get your letters mixed up.
Yeah. And these
what does DNA stand for? National Dyslexia Association.
Exactly,
yeah.
yes. These are the signs that I have. This isn't how it manifests itself with me. And so for 30 years, I went through life just believing that, well, actually, I used to try to have these little games in my mind where I'd try to distinguish between intelligence and cleverness, because I obviously wasn't clever because I couldn't pass an exam. I obviously wasn't clever because I couldn't read a book. I mean, I was reading large print picture books until my teens, when my younger brother was reading Dick Francis and stuff like that. And I just felt a little bit behind everybody else and a little bit slow. And if you'd asked me what dyslexia was, I'd have said, well, it's when you see words moving around, etc., and that wasn't what I had.
Yeah. So when you actually managed to get yourself to university, though, didn't you?
Yeah, I dropped out of school a couple of times. But I always believed that I had it in me. And what was strange was that the further up the academic ladder I went, the easier it got. Because lower down, what happens is you're given information and you remember it. Or at least in my day, this is what happens. You're given information and you remember it. And that's very hard for me. As I progressed, I was allowed to explore ideas and concepts and come up with structures for myself that I could understand.
You went to Lampeter.
I did.
Which, when I was at school, if you didn't do particularly well, you'd end up at either Keele or Lampeter. It was like the equivalent of saying, if you don't work hard, you'll end up sweeping the streets. It was, if you don't revise, you'll go to Keele or Lampeter. And so, without being rude, about Lampeter, in fact, you did you get a place there through clearing?
No, I didn't actually. No, I got a place there because I just really wanted to go to university. I really wanted to go. I wasn't qualified to do any job. And I didn't enjoy any job that I was doing, and I kept getting sacked because I wasn't very good at clerical work, because it involves various types of organisation and understanding, you know, a lot of written work and reading work, and I just wasn't very good at that. And I really wanted to go to university, and I took an A-level, and I got it, I passed it, and I went to Lampeter. But you're right, lots of people go to Lampeter through clearing, and that's where it became obvious that something was going on for me, because I knew a lot of people who were dyslexic there, because they have a lot of clearing students. They'd noticed that a lot of these students were very intelligent but couldn't pass exams. And so they set up a very, very good dyslexia institute, I suppose you could call it there. And so a lot of my friends have been found out to be dyslexic, and they were telling me, Martin, you might be dyslexic as well. And it was only through going to Lampeter that I had any chance of finding out, to be honest with you.
So people that knew about it were able to test for it and kind of diagnose you, if you like.
Yeah.
And now, because of all these experiences of yours, you are the guy behind the National Dyslexia in Business Award. So tell us about this.
Well, it's an absolute passion of mine. People should know the statistics. Between 10 and 20% of the population, depending on who you read, has some form of dyslexia. And yet, a recent survey was done, I think it was by the BBC, or it could have been in the Times, or a BBC survey in the Times, was that 40% of Britain's self-made millionaires have dyslexia. And what we'll find out is dyslexia isn't a disability at all. People think of it as a disability or a huge problem. It only becomes a problem when the world erects barriers to those people with dyslexia. And so what I'm hoping to do is promote the idea that dyslexia is actually people with dyslexia can be extremely high achievers, and once you remove the barriers to that, then you can see them flourish. And I want to reward that. I want to recognise it, and I want to say, yeah, well done. You've probably gone through a hell of a lot in your life, and here's a piece of recognition. This year we're holding the award in London in the British Library.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for telling us some of your story this morning, and for that joke, which, well, I've never heard anything like it.
It removed the need for one of the songs, didn't it?
It did. It's Martin Bloomfield here on BBC Radio Nottingham. From Nottingham he is, and if you would like more information about dyslexia, perhaps you think someone in your family or yourself may have it and you want more information, then there's always the action line number to call and you'll be put in touch with the right people. And that number is 0115 934 8484.